Greetings all, welcome to Everything Borrowed, where we sit down to share stories and have conversations with entrepreneurs to artists and everyone in between. Today's episode is powered by Blake's Hard Cider, 100% fresh pressed, all natural and gluten-free, straight from our family's 75-year-old farm in Southeast Michigan. Find us in your local grocer or have Blake's direct ship to your home by visiting blakestore.com. Use promo code EverythingBorrowed to receive 10% off your first order. Must be 21 years of age. Please enjoy mindfully. Hear that, folks? You might want to grab some popcorn for this episode, or you might want to grab some grain-free paleo puffs by LesserEvil. Today we sit down with Charles Coristine as we discuss his journey from Wall Street into craft food. Charles found himself exhausted from the Wall Street grind a decade ago and made a transition into the food space. The struggling LesserEvil brand was first owned by Gene Hackman and had the right concept, but needed to pivot and make some changes to their marketing, philosophy, and align with mind, body, and spirit of the consumer. A man of business, family, and spirituality, Charles finds a balance in all spaces of his life. I'm looking forward to borrowing knowledge and insight from Charles' wisdom. Enjoy the episode. Charles, what's going on, man?
What's going on? How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for coming on. Really excited to have you as kind of a marketing nerd. I love what you guys have done from a branding and marketing perspective. It's just really clean. The messaging's really great, and I think it's just a really impressive package all around. And they taste great.
It's been a huge work in progress for us. We wasn't always that. I actually designed. I don't have any of the old packaging, but if I showed you our old packaging, did you see it with it was the Buddha bowl with the Buddha on it, and the LesserEvil was in the far corner?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, the old packaging wasn't so good.
Well, just kind of jumping right into it, give us a little background on LesserEvil, and I want to get into some of the ideas around kind of mindfulness. As I love when people talk about that in their packaging and products. And it seems like you guys have a really, really good message. And it seems like it comes from, kind of your philosophy on life and kind of what you're looking to, bring to the world. So I find that, really interesting. But what's the origin story of LesserEvil?
Okay, so LesserEvil, this is kind of its third life. It was started by Gene Hackman and Jim Cramer. Back
the actor?
Into 2000, yeah, the actor. And
I love Gene Hackman.
It's funny. Hoosiers is one of my favorite movies of all time. So it's funny that he owned it. I think that Gene's wife Betsy was really good friends with Jim Cramer, and they wanted to start a popcorn company. They just missed it. I think they did everything really well. I mean, the brand name was good. They spent a lot of money on the concept. They just never got it quite tweaked to where it needed to be. In the financial model that basically which we had to take over was never right. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about some things that are inspiring, but when we look at capitalism and trying to make a company survive, you have to look at margin structure, and what they were doing was losing money.
The unsexy side of business, the the margin conversation and the pricing, and I know as kind of being a small fish in a big pond in the craft beverage world and the beverage world, I imagine you guys are up against the Frito-Lays of the world and the Skinny Pops, and I imagine that it's a it's a tough gig to be in, and you have to be in your game at all times.
Yeah, so major competitive advantage for us was the jump into being vertically integrated, basically into opening up our own manufacturing facility. What that allowed us to do was basically take out a co-packer, meaning not use one. So we added probably 25 margin points to the equation, and it allowed us to use whatever ingredients we wanted to use, because co-packers typically want to use a toolbox that's pretty narrow because they don't want to have to clean down the equipment, every time, if you're using coconut oil or avocado oil or Himalayas. I mean, a lot of these ingredients, not a lot of people use. So it can be a logistical nightmare for a co-packer. So when we make our own stuff, we can do whatever we please, right, which allows us to be a little more creative.
Yeah, and I think that You see a lot of people in the food and beverage industry, they do try to source out, third party for production. And it just always seems that you lose a little bit in the quality, the creativity. And I think that having those.
You're bang on right. Nobody cares as much about your own product as you do. And when you use a co-packer, typically, and I'm not meaning to hack on it, it's just they don't, the workers there, it's not their company.
Right.
They don't have a vested interest in making sure that the popcorn is just popped perfectly. I mean, we literally sit down every morning, Rachel and I, and we look at popcorn expansion, we look at the oil, we look at the salt coverage, we look at how fresh the popcorn is, and that's all we do. And I know that sounds silly, and I'm not selling my popcorn, but it is. I guess I am kind of.
Well, it's a product worth selling, so sing it proudly. First generation was Gene Hackman, and his version, and there was another iteration before you kind of took on the concept in the business.
Sure. So a father and son team bought the brand from Hackman and Kramer in 2010, and they had been in food. They were really smart guys. Just didn't really realize how expensive snacks were. They didn't have any kind of backing. Again, that they were using a co-packing model, so there was little they could do to fix the business model other than cut their trade spend, which when you cut your trade spend, it typically means that retailers aren't all that enticed because you're really cutting their purse strings to how they can promote, if that makes any sense.
Of course. When you look at, your, business model and kind of going back to being, in this huge industry, being a craft product, your value proposition obviously is well communicated on your, kind of on your packaging. But when you look at marketing in a world in such a huge landscape against people with huge budgets, how have you guys approached getting value and actually being able to reach customers? Because I feel like, from an outsider perspective, you guys have done a very, very good job in getting people to, communicate to your brand. But what is your kind of philosophy on how you approach that as a strategy? Being a smaller company in, in such a large industry.
Really good question, because there are a lot of great products that don't have great packaging and people never try them, right? And we've seen great products leave the market on a continual basis. I would say if I was talking to some entrepreneur, good packaging is a must. Not only good packaging, but building a brand block, in the set, so the product sells itself. Mm-hmm. Because if the product doesn't sell itself, you're going to spend a ton of money getting off-shelf display. Because in off-shelf display, they want a product that is going to justify giving that shelf space away for, Whole Foods charges a set amount, for that stuff. But unless your stuff is selling, unless your stuff is selling, gangbusters on shelf, they're not going to give you that opportunity.
Sure.
Whereas if your stuff does really well, so if your packaging is not great and your value proposition is not great, you're going to have to take out ads.
Right.
Ads don't sell nearly as well as off-shelf display.
Sure.
So you want to get chosen for off-shelf display. That's the secret to the game. And the only way to do that is to have an amazing product, but even more so than that is to have great packaging.
Sure. And did you, are you from the food space? Is your background? I know that you did a stint on Wall Street. Had you had any familiarity? What was the interest that drove you to, entering into this world? And that's kind of that's a gutsy move, when you're going from Wall Street to craft food.
It was a cry for help. I was in investment banking. I was a bond trader for most of my career, and
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. And living in New York City for a long time, and it's a young man's game. And I think in my late 30s, I started to get a little fried, and sure. I was out too much, doing the commute. I was up too early. I wasn't getting enough sleep, and I think at some point I started crawling out of my skin. I was like, I got to try something else. I can't keep doing this. So at that time, that's, when we talk about, I think we're going to get into this a little bit, but we talk about kind of spiritual curiosity. But, when times get really tough, you try to look to make some changes. And at that time, I was looking at meditation just to kind of learn to live with myself. And, I was really making tweaks to my diet. I'd gone vegetarian and I was trying everything. I just wanted to feel good. And, I realized how much I loved food. Um, and then this friend of mine, the guy who I mentioned earlier, was kind of the middleman,
Yeah.
who had bought the brand and was kind of like, how much money I'm going to put into this, who's getting cold feet, said, I've got this. Maybe you might be interested in this. And I took one look at it, and it was synchronicity that he offered it to me. And I said, I'm going to give that a shot. It was impulsive, definitely.
Well, yeah. Well, impulsive or alignment or synchronistic. One of the things that in doing the first season of the show, we've got to talk to entrepreneurs from all over the country, and you hear this thread of people who kind of are having this synchronistic or kind of alignment in their life with where they take their business. And then as an observer, it's really interesting to be able to see that thread woven to some of these really great ideas. And you kind of look at this kind of entrepreneur that is now aligned.
You start opening up to new things, right? I mean,
you see an alignment, mind, body, and spirit a little bit with the entrepreneur, and I think it makes it a more powerful impact because you're not just working for profits. You're working for an idea, a concept, an aspiration beyond success of the business, and I think that's a more enticing fuel than the dollars at the end of the day.
The enticing fuel at the end of the day in every entrepreneur's journey is, I totally agree with everything you're saying, but what happens is, so you find this alignment that fits better, right? And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to invest some money into this. And at first you're like, okay, it feels pretty good. But then you start running out of money. And then the kicker comes when you start to take your friends and family money, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this started out as something that was, a nice little hobby, becomes something like, I can't lose other people's money,
Right.
Deep shit. And you start to really have to buckle down,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had to go through similar rounds of my dad and uncle backing, our hard cider company, which was,
exactly
so I know exactly
about, right?
what it is, and it's motivating because you appreciate the trust they put in you, and you don't want to let them down.
Exactly. Then all of a sudden you start working harder for them than you did for yourself.
Right, exactly. Maybe that's a good thing. So, yeah, I definitely understand that journey. So when did you kind of start the LesserEvil journey?
So I started beginning in 2012. So that, I guess it's been 8 years, and I would say I spent the first probably 2 or 3 years making a lot of mistakes. The one thing that I learned when I was working in my previous profession was to make a lot of mistakes and to cut my mistakes pretty quickly. So I think when I think about what I did right and what kind of averted potential disaster, was I failed a bunch of times at the beginning, and I cut my losses pretty quickly, and I kept pivoting. I just constantly pivoted, and eventually, after 3 years and losing a shit ton of money, I found something that started to sell. But
well, they say if you're gonna fail fast, and if you're gonna make mistakes, make them early as opposed to later. So, I think getting it out of your system and kind of finding what works. When you were 3 years in and you finally hit that, you found what was working. Was it a product? Was it a marketing? Was it a distribution channel? What was kind of the
laughing Buddha, organic popcorn, and extra virgin oil.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it wasn't just one thing. I mean, I think the packaging spoke to people, but we did something different in a category that was exploding. And, at that time, 2014, popcorn was super hot. Skinny Pop was on fire, Angie's was on fire, Popcorn Indiana was in the I mean, it was a really explosive category, and we differentiated it enough where we felt like we could really compete.
one of the things I really liked is you had some advice that you would give someone, and you said, we're the sum of our habits, and pick wisely what you repeatedly do. I know that has become more of a truism for me as I've gotten older.
It's so funny, right? I mean,
you don't need those habits when you're younger, but to stay sane and to stay on top of things, you really got to create, positive habits. As you get older, you see them affect you more. And, I've noticed that in my life, but what are some of the habits that you've tried to really, build into your,
before I get into that, I mean, for your listeners, imagine being told that COVID was going to last, 9 or 10 months, you'd find that almost insurmountable. But if you tackle it one day at a time, and don't look at it as a big picture, it makes the mountain a lot easier to climb, right? I mean, I think that by looking at my life as a work in progress and every day just trying to tweak what I'm trying to do to feel better. And when I say feel better, I feel like my barometer is how open my heart is. So every day I am trying to tweak, how I feel about things and how I feel about life. And I've got this massive, if you looked at my schedule, you'd laugh at me because I'm constantly messing with my schedule.
That's one thing that I think we, repeatedly do is it's a constant evolution, and it's never like you have the full routine figured out. You're constantly, changing things and working on what feels right and evolving that, from one generation of thinking to the next. And, you talk a little bit about, your flow states that you find yourself in. I know you said a book that you've been reading is Flow, actually. And I've experienced this, for me, running and, meditation are ways to get in flow. And I actually, people at work think I'm crazy. I walk around, we have a farm, so I'm constantly walking around the farm, but I do some of my best thinking in just kind of a walking, philosophy, a walking, thinking kind of dialogue with myself. And, I really think that helps facilitate a flow state where things are kind of coming to me in a creative way and I'm able to process them. So, that's kind of where I find, kind of a real opportunity to I guess, receive, information in and then process it. Have you, found particular, habits that have added to your flow state?
I think we're basically large antennas,
Yeah.
If you look at your brain, they say that, most of your thoughts don't actually even exist in your brain. They're like outside your brain. They can cut pieces of your brain out of your body and you'll still remember stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I don't want to get into it, but
I geek out on this stuff. I mean,
I geek out on it too. I'm always listening to different self-help books or whatever. But, we talk about flow state. I think it's really just like you're saying, like when you go for those walks or whatever, and you just open up and you kind of get out of yourself, you receive a lot more because you're in a receiving state. So when I think about where I receive the most, now my big thing is I get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning and I go and journal, and it's called, and I don't journal. It's like a free form writing. So I get upstairs and I just write for half an hour and I can't stop. So you're not allowed to take your pen off the paper. And I've enjoyed that so much that I do it at the end of the day now too. So I will talk about like how I feel when I wake up and, how I want to express the day and what's going right and what's not, whatever like comes into my world. And then I go and I stretch and then I meditate. And then I say my little affirmations or whatever. But at the end of the writing and the meditation stuff like that, I feel pretty open.
I think that's great, and I think that makes for a very mindful and thoughtful approach to how you engage with your employees, your customers, the way in which you look at your business. And I know we all get wrapped up into the day-to-day. I know I've been less mindful or more mindful at times. Right now, with how crazy COVID's been and how we've had to pivot so much, I found myself in a little bit less of a mindful state than I've other times been. And you kind of are constantly having to like recenter, bring it back in.
You know what? I'm the same way as you. Like I'll get triggered, right? Like I just did all this work. I just did all that. What do you mean? How can I get triggered so easily?
Yeah.
But it's not about not getting triggered, right? I mean, we're humans. This is just what we do. But I think now what I notice when I get triggered, I notice it faster, right? And I could say, okay, I'm overreacting. I'm getting into this, and I can breathe, and I can.
It's the note. You kind of, as soon as you do it, you're like, damn it, I did it.
Yeah, you notice it, right? And then you get back. You can come back. You can come back a lot faster. I used to get triggered, and I wouldn't even notice I was triggered for hours. And I could, I get in a bad mood. I might start sulking. Something bad could throw me off for a whole morning. Now, I get triggered. Maybe it lasts 5 or 10 minutes, and then I just kind of somehow I start to move on.
You talked about being a receiver, and I think that in time there'll be more truth to that than currently is understood. Because I do, Nikola Tesla talked about it a little bit, and that you're kind of a universal receiver, and the way to get your own self out of your way so you can receive the messages that are kind of supposed to be coming in. And I believe that there's some version of truth in that statement. It sounds a little woo-woo and a little crazy, for especially on Wall Street and Main Street. But I do believe that science will eventually come to some conclusion that has that connects that in some way, because it seems to be true in the artistic endeavors and the way you watch artists pull things from the ether.
Oh, how they get inspired, exactly. Or some people, if you ever listen to, I love Ram Dass, but I mean he never choreographed anything he spoke.
Isn't it crazy to listen to him for hours?
Listen to him. He's got his own app. He's done literally thousands of speeches, and he literally just goes up there, and it's really hard to do because you'll listen to him. He'll pause for like 15 seconds. Guys like me who have a massive ego are just not comfortable in that kind of flow state where you just let it come. But he had no problem. I mean, he just go on and on and on.
And you watch some of those people, and it makes you think, and those are the artists and the spiritual leaders of the group. And the one thing that I like about what I see in LesserEvil, and I see to a larger degree in businesses popping up, is there is this return to connectivity a little bit with as far as having an awareness of for lack of a better term, the sacred or the unknown, and kind of a humility based in that's around call it the spiritual aspect of things and the connected aspect, even just the human connection aspect of things. And I think that's really healthy as we're evolving and entrepreneurs are evolving. And it's not like you see that maybe a little more in sports and art and music, and you don't see it a whole lot in entrepreneurship or business. It's kind of, it's numbers and it's that. But I think the more and more we can have more entrepreneurs, discussing that, I think it makes for healthier businesses and healthier, business environments and better products.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you're seeing I think you're starting to see more conscious capitalists. I mean, maybe I just live in a world that, obviously food tends to be lean more that way. So I get exposed to them a little bit more, but I see more and more capitalists that are into this new holistic way of being, where you can live, in alignment and still make money, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that that's when you're on the right path. Kind of jumping into, this year and COVID. I guess I'm curious, what, how that's affected your business, how you've had to pivot, the changes you've had to make. Is it affected business better, worse? I imagine a food brand, there's, it depends on how you're distributed and kind of where you're at, but, what's this year been like for LesserEvil?
Great question. So, at the beginning it was a little scary. We didn't know what was going to happen. I think I was worried about, what happens if our customers don't pay us as quickly as they were going to pay us. So I initially freaked out because we're so dependent on cash flow. And so the first thing I did when COVID hit was I went to my existing investors and tried to raise a little bit of a float, let's say an extra 6 weeks of capital just to make sure that in a liquidity crisis that we were going to still survive. So that was the first thing I did. The second thing that happened was it was very apparent that there was going to be a tale of two markets. A lot of the food service guys, a lot of the guys the airlines, a lot of the restaurants and stuff that we deal with, which is probably 20% of our business, was going to disappear.
Right.
And it happened right away. And then what we noticed was that the grocery picked up and basically, level set everything. I mean, we probably saw our grocery and natural business go up 25 or 30%. So net would probably over a course of 2 months or 3 months, let's say from March to May, we found out that we were going to be okay.
Right.
Those were a pretty scary couple of months. We had 8 COVID cases in our facility, in our warehouse, which was a little hard to overcome. So we, for probably 6 to 8 weeks, we were running, let's say that we had cases on the second shift. The first shift had to, kind of overlap the second shift. Then we had problems on the third shift, and the second shift had to break. So, and then we had to break the lines apart. We had to segregate all the shifts. So we were probably running at 60% capacity for probably 2.5 months or whatever. So it hurt, but we made it through. I think things normalized a lot in the summer. Still, a lot of business still hasn't come back on board.
Right.
But, still we have yet to see food service, come back.
When you look at your products and kind of how you're distributed, are you, did you go a self-distributed model? I mean, obviously to some degree, is it, all big box retail, local? How, that is one thing I think as, coming from the beverage space, that's one of the biggest challenges and opportunities, to really, scale a product. And, where are you guys at with your thinking on how you approach that? Because I know there's a lot of different ways in which you can, attack that.
We realized that through this, we wanted to do more direct to consumer, but we've got a product that's, beverage definitely has its own challenges too, but we've got a product that's very voluminous. So our product doesn't cube out all that well. So to ship a big box of 12 bags of popcorn across the United States is, it can be like $25 shipping.
Right.
And talking about $30 for the product. So it's not a product that leads well to selling direct to consumers. So we're heavily relying on big box retailers, so we talk about, grocery, and natural, and then a lot of like local distributors.
When you look at, kind of the future as it relates to, your business, your brand, what do you see as being, success? I know success isn't always kind of moving target, but, what are the goals and aspirations that you have, for LesserEvil? Is it to be in every store? Is it to be, a well-known, understood brand? What is the ultimate, what's the peak of the mountain look like?
I don't think we'll ever be Frito-Lay, obviously, or, any of these big brands. I think when I look at my goal, I'd like to be the number one organic snack brand in the United States. And, I'd like to be the brand that has the best ingredients, that has the best value proposition, that basically sells organic better for you at a price that conventional companies do. And yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, I can't do this forever. I would look this, it would be lying to say that at some point I wouldn't look to sell, to some bigger brand. I've got 2 kids. At some point,
Right.
I'm gonna need to move on.
No, I think that that's interesting. And when you look at what would be the hurdles or the things that would stop you from getting to that goal, what is the biggest obstacle you see in kind of climbing that mountain? Because I know I think about that a lot. We have similar goals, for our business, and I often think about, what are those things that would prevent that from happening? And sometimes I wonder if it's my own way of thinking about the path there, and and things of that nature. But is it sometimes it's just strictly capital.
Big part of it's capital, right? I mean,
right.
you can grow pretty quickly by taking, a lot of the low hanging fruit. But at some point you reach a point in your life, in your product life, where you have to start going after diminishing returns. Like there are certain retailers that become really expensive to deal with, but in order to get to the next level, you got to start paying, instead of one case slotting, you got to spend three. And I think that who some of these retailers are. Um,
Yep.
Things get a little bit more skinny. I worry about how fast can we scale the factory. There's certainly financial limitations to us as is without taking a bigger partner. So we've got to continue to grow really smart.
Yeah, and it's really that, we go through the same challenges, and it's the balancing act. Do you want to, have more control of the vision and the goals of the company and kind of take it at, at a patient pace, or do you really want to have it tomorrow? And, there's cases that work, for companies both ways, and I think it's really kind of fitting into, kind of the culture and the mission of the company is ultimately, I think, where you find that answer. At least that's what we've kind of reverted back to.
For us, it's always been about innovation. The reason why we've been able to, succeed where others haven't is just because we come up with so many different items. And when you innovate like we do, naturally, some retailers care about that, and you get love from a certain segment of the market. But I think the key to our success is just to continue to innovate, and continue to come up with new items.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beverage space you see, or at least maybe it's just what I'm paying attention to, but you saw the innovation in the craft, kind of industry take over, or take some share of, of the big players. And, I feel that, you're seeing that now, or at least I'm becoming aware of it, now in kind of the food space. And I think that that's a huge opportunity, is that serve the craft community on the beverage side and the alcohol beverage side, very well. And I think that I see a lot of similarities there.
I hope that happens. I hope
it feels like it feels like it's starting to. And I think as not only, capitalists become, more conscious, consumers become more conscious, and I think products like yours really speak to that. I mean, about every health, kind of notation is on the packaging, USDA organic, non-GMO, paleo, grain-free, gluten-free. I mean, that means something to people these days,
Big thing is sustainability. If you look at most of our packaging, it's got, it's biodegradably enhanced, and you can see that on the back of that. It's made with biodegradable packaging. I don't think there's anyone else that does that. We do stuff like we compost all our waste. We are investing in energy efficiency initiatives, i.e., putting solar panels on our roof. So we kind of want to lead the way in that, and I hope the consumer will reward us in our diligence to doing the little things well.
I think that matters, because I think it shows, from a consumer standpoint, it shows. And I guess, you can assume that they care about their product if they care about those other things and those little things, and I think that, that goes back to the value proposition that you're adding compared to something that's made in 18 different factories across the world and shipped all over. And you know what I'm saying? It's like, there's not a whole lot of human connection to that I think, consumers are becoming more aware, of the products that they're putting into their bodies. I love the packaging, and I love, the idea that it actually tastes good and it feels like it's good for me. And, as someone who's kind of, in his early 30s, this is kind of becoming the snacks that you want to have in your pantry, because you're going to just down a bag of something, and it would be better this than, I don't want to call it the competition, but something a little less healthy. But I know that these have a decent amount of protein in them. So if I eat like a whole bag of these, am I going to swell up? Am I going to get too big? Is that something I have to worry about? Can I eat a whole bag of these? That's what I'm asking.
What are you eating? Apple cider vinegar paleo puffs?
Yeah, these ones don't have, but some of your other ones had a lot of protein in them that I was eating
Yeah,
earlier.
those ones not so much. We have the power curls that's were a little more protein.
Right here. Oh no, these ones aren't.
Got it all, man.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I got the hookup completely, and they all taste good. That's the other thing. So
I'm gonna have to come back and do more podcasts. Will you buy more of my products if I do more podcasts?
yeah, I might be your best customer by the time we're done here. Kind of the ethos of this podcast is just kind of sharing, concepts and ideas and borrowing them, because I think that there's a lot of power in, the fact that people smarter than us have figured out things, and we don't have to go through. That's what makes us different than the animals. We don't have to go through. We can learn from someone to not cross the road, like a squirrel can't. Like, it just crossed the road, and you know what I'm saying? Like, so, anyways, what has been the best advice that you've been given, and who gave it to you?
I used to take shit really. This is so true. So I used to take pretty much everything personally, and I think over the years, I've started to realize that when someone's someone's expressing frustration with me, it's not always because of me. That sometimes internally that they may be slightly off kilter. And I've gotten a lot better at just recognizing that and not being so hard on myself. But don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm an asshole, and I know, and it's about differentiating those times. It's like when you're with my wife, for instance. Sometimes I deserve it, and sometimes I don't. And when I don't deserve it, I try not to be too defensive. And I think that that's helped a lot with my marriage.
Sure. When you look at, your interest in the food space, do you, and you look at your product innovation, where does it go from here? And, kind of put that into two questions. How do you guys innovate? Is it whiteboard sessions? Is it coming from you? What's your process for innovation?
Yeah, I'd love to say we have this scientific process to innovation, but it typically doesn't work like that. It typically works in like, okay, we launched an animal-based egg white protein, and we did that because we thought it represented a very clean protein source. But we recognize that most of our stuff is in this vegetable, plant-based world. So we've been messing around with figuring out a way to add sustainable plant, protein to a snack. So that's kind of been our mandate for the last 3 or 4 months. I think we're gonna launch a peanut, which is gonna replace, an actual peanut or a cashew or an almond with organic pea protein, but uses cassava as well. So it'll be similar to I can't believe I'm giving you all my secrets here. I haven't even launched it yet.
Well, it sounds like a great idea, but I just love to get into the mind of kind of how companies and business, and entrepreneurs look at that process, because there's such a conversation to be had around how you expand your portfolio, or you bring more people under the LesserEvil umbrella, and still try to stay true to the mantra and the ethos.
So the brand, we got to use organic ingredients. We got to use better for you oils, no vegetable oil. You got to, there's a whole bunch of confines, that we have to stick, kind of stay. But what we've got, which is pretty cool at our facility, is this twin screw extrusion technology. And twin screw extruders will let you combine all kinds of different foods. So the first thing we do when we try to innovate is we try to stick it in this powerful extruder and see if the food combination actually tastes good. Because you can have the coolest products in the world, but unless they actually taste good, it doesn't work. So that's step one. And then, is there a market for what we're actually trying to create? And that's not always the easiest question to ask. So then we try to launch it with just a couple of retailers, that aren't too critical and understand that this may not work. That and we'll kind of give them a break and a first mover's advantage. And then if it meets all those things and there's some sort of velocity, we'll proceed to kind of a bigger launch.
Well, I really appreciate the time and the conversation, and huge fan, and even more of a fan after talking to you and hearing your story. And best of wishes to you and the LesserEvil team, and love to follow up and talk a little bit more. And we have a couple retail stores up here, and I'd love to see LesserEvil displayed in our stores. So maybe I'll follow up with you afterwards and see how we can make that happen.
Oh, that's so nice of you, man. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, of course. And for people who want to get your product or want to find it throughout the country, what's the best way to do it? Can they get it shipped online? I know we talked about that, or find it at a local retailer.
We're at Publix, Kroger, some of the bigger grocery chains in the country. You can find us at Whole Foods, Natural Grocers, Vitamin Cottage, any of those kind of Sprouts, any of those kind of markets. Amazon, Thrive Market, or our website would probably be the best way to grab us.
Really, really appreciate connecting with you, and we share a lot of the same philosophy, and really enjoyed talking to you, man. So best of wishes, okay?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You can find Everything Borrowed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Show your support and drop a 5-star review to help more people find our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and everythingborrowedpodcast.com. EBP is produced by Chelsea Cox, Jason Brown, and Vox Adams. Edited and filmed by Nick Ferguson. Art is by Adam Yarborough. Everything Borrowed is an After Hours Media production. Copyright 2021.